All right, testing, testing. Okay, we're at the home page for CSCI 2240, and under content, our next topic is step 2 to download Visual Studio to C++. In that module, we have directions to install, and we'll want to print a copy of these and follow pretty much step by step to properly install the editor and compiler, their interactive development center. So it says we're directions to install and launch Visual Studio 2017. Visual C++, it is free for our use. So go to the following site. Peek at that. And at the Visual Studio site, we're using Windows PCs. Click to download the Visual Studio Community 2017. And save the file and follow the prompts to install. The process does take a while, some time. So be patient. Check your device frequently for reaction to certain prompts as you move through the installation process. And be sure to install the Microsoft's free Visual C++ components. This is sometimes an extra option, so read your prompts carefully. Sometimes we just click, click, click through defaults. Make sure that you read and click through your defaults, selecting the C++ components to enhance our version of Visual Studio. Again, that does take some time to download. Once downloaded, it will launch, and we will see a need for you to create your account. And you'll use your star ID at go.minstate.edu and your star ID password. Following that creation of your account, we'll be looking at the startup window of Visual Studio, which will be our startup from now on. And we want to close this startup page. It's an informational page, nothing that we need at this point, so just go ahead and click the close button there. Continuing, it's always wise to maximize the window you're working in, so make sure you maximize your window in Visual Studio. And now we're getting ready to kind of prep Visual Studio for our work in C++. So we're going to choose File from the main menu, choose New Project, and on the New Project dialog screen, set the following. Well, we are on the New Project dialog screen now from File, New Project. We want to make sure that we are coding in Visual C++. As you see, there's many languages supported by Visual Studio. We should see the Visual C++ now because we added that component to our environment. If you don't, you will need to get a hold of myself or the help desk. So as we continue, we are going to choose and pull down Visual C++, not Visual C#, be careful. Pull down Visual C++, choose Windows Desktop, and then we move to the middle section working area of the screen. Choose the Windows Console application, and then browse to the bottom of the page where we are naming our project. So this is the text box where you will type in the name of your program, the name of the project, the name that you're going to be calling our entire working environment. So for example, our first official programming assignment is Prog 2, our program from chapter 2. Now you're going to need to browse to reset the location to, so click Browse in the location text box area, we click browse, and we want to browse to C:. Remember we created your first name folder? So browse to your C:, first name. So you have a path C:, Kate. Or in this actual example, I have a generic path for C:, students. And then looking at my K. Jansen student subdirectory. We want to browse to your C:, first name path. The solution name, well, the solution name will populate automatically with the name that you issue in the name field. So that is automatically populated once you type in your name field information. Make sure it says create directory for solution. That should be checked by default. And then click OK. Now we're working within the environment of the C++ compiler editor development center, and there's some things we want to do to customize our working area. So choose View, Other Windows, Solution Explorer, and the Solution Explorer window will appear. Right-click on the Solution Explorer title bar and choose Doc as tabbed document. This will place it in your editor rather than allowing it to float around in your editor. So it's a sub-window. We want it open. We want it to stay open, so we're going to dock it. And I typically dock mine in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see that as we look at our beginning examples of C++. Experiment with this window. It can be placed wherever you want it. I typically arrange mine as follows. Create the project, choose View, Other Windows, Solution Explorer, and add existing or create new code, source code files. Double click on the file that I want to open if I'm opening a file. Arrange the window settings by choosing Window, New Vertical Tab Group, and you can then size and resize each window. Experiment with what's comfortable for you. So we're customizing, setting up our own working environment. We want to be able to display line numbers in our code editor where we type our code, all of our syntax, all of our logic. When we're working in the editor, we want to display line numbers so we can reference those line numbers as we're talking with each other or in our team. So to display line numbers, remember that they're just there for our reference, for documentation as we're chatting with others or peers or working in teams. They do not cause any interference with execution of your code. So just follow these directions. To display line numbers on the main menu, choose Tool Options, expand the text editor node, and then select either the node for the language you are using or all languages to turn on line numbers in all languages. Or you can type line number in the quick launch box. And then select line numbers. So we've chosen options. And we got all numbers. And then we want to select line numbers in the display box area. Make sure that's checked. Now, when we're working in these dialog boxes, just remember you may need to scroll up or down within these sub options to get to the display section and then click line numbers. Be sure you click OK to enforce. And that's customizing one-time activities that we have to do. Now we're ready to begin to type our source code. And we're looking at the editor itself. And this is Visual Studio. We have main menu navigation horizontally across the top. File, save, some editing features. Some of those view options are project settings. We'll be building and running our program, and those are kind of the tools that we'll be using to begin with. You begin to type your source code in the editor. Work around the supplied code, which is required at a minimum. So this is a minimum setup, a minimum construction. And it looks like kind of specific code. The different syntax rules apply, and we'll begin to dissect each line and each new line of syntax information as we continue in the chapters in the text. But this will appear when you construct a new project. So at a minimum, we're going to see this. Now, this is the minimum code for execution also. Following is my sample for figure 2.3 on page 49. So if you care to look at your book right now, this is kind of a skip ahead, but working at installing and making sure that things work after installation. So on page 49, we have modifying our first C++ program, printing a line of text with multiple statements. So we have our edited code in the code editor. We got it there somehow. You don't have to worry about that right now. We have our beginning documentation lines, the // comment, // comment. We can have multiple lines of comments, each preceded with the // And we have a beginning required documentation format. Remember, that is published at D2L. Here's an example of internal documentation, a // and we're just documenting a piece or part of this program. In the editor, I have added required items to the above source code found on page 49, and you will need to do the same, and then make sure that you save everything. So comparing this code to page 49, there's a couple of things we have to do to upgrade the code to work in our new 2017 compiler of C++. You must always, so these are things we always do when we're working with a new file or a new project. You must always insert the # include standard avx.h with the quotation marks. Now you see that right here in line 4. # include space quote stdafx.h close quote. And this must be the first line of code following your opening documentation, however many lines that might be. You must always add the following as the last 2 lines of source code to hold the output screen. So this is our output screen. It's the black command line screen, and it'll flash and it'll go away unless we write code to hold the output so you and I can read it, interact with it, and then when we're done, press a key to continue, and then it will disappear. We're back at our editor. So the black screen overlays our working area on execution, and we want it to remain throughout execution until we're ready to say we want to dismiss it. To do that, we add these 2 lines of code: system, parenthesis, quote, pause, close quote, close parenthesis, semicolon. And you'll see that I've done that in line 13. System, open, quote, pause, close paren, semicolon. Spacing is significant. Upper lowercase is significant. So be careful when you're adding that line 13. And then return space 0. Now that is a 0. It's return 0. The 0 is not slashed in the text, but it is slashed within our code. So return 0, semicolon. Remember the space, return space 0, semicolon. Now we're talking about these things. I'm not expecting that you're writing any code or typing any code into Visual Studio at this point in time. We're just feeling our way. This is a document that you want to print. Follow the directions, keep it handy, and particularly as we get closer to writing our first program, which is developing our first program in chapter 2. So you'll want to come back to this at that time. Notice that I have included an extra new line. Now that's a \n. It's the new line command in line 11. So in line 11, you see the \n. You will recognize that soon as forcing a new line. It's a carriage return, and our I-beam moves to the next line of output on your output screen. So here I have a blank line. Welcome to C++, exclamation point, and then a new line and a new line. So I'm right here ready to continue with more output. You'll be very familiar with that syntax, \n, as we get a chance to move ahead with writing our own code. This is a technique to be sure that there is spacing above the automatic press any key to continue message that appears on your output screen. And that press any key to continue ... is supplied automatically at the end of your executed program on the command window. Number 9, must always complete. In the editor, settings for every project must be defined by doing the following. Choose your project, pull down to project name properties. Have it down here for us. So pull down to, from project, pull down to project, and it'll be your name, prod2 properties, my first program properties, whatever your project name is, properties, pull down to that, and then it'll open up the properties window, dialog box. Left-hand margin, pull down to pre-compiled headers. Moving over to the right-hand side, click on pre-compiled header. So click somewhere in this first line to activate the pull-down arrow. When the pull-down arrow is available, click on it to pull down and select the option not using pre-compiled headers. That's the option we want. There's, I think, 3, maybe 4, several options within the pull-down options arrow. And you want to choose not using pre-compiled headers. And then click Apply and OK. Other important features of C++. Good programming habits include indentation of code. Follow the author's example. So as we're reading and discussing sample programs, be sure you're looking at spacing and include that type of spacing and indentation with spaces and enter key to space your lines within your code. So for example, back in, you see there's a couple of blank spaces. I just hit the enter key in row 5 and the enter key in row 6. That's just white space. It doesn't do anything in execution, but it certainly helps in the readability of your code. So we don't want all of our code back to back to back to back. It'd be hard to decipher, hard to document, and hard to interpret, and hard to read. So extra blank rows, you just type an enter key. In an extra spacing, you see we could indent, where here I have some indentation going on. This is the sub part of this outer part, so I want to indent it. And typically we're indenting by 3 spaces at a time. And again, white space, that is an enter key, or the space bar does not interrupt with coding, unless you place a space bar between certain syntax, like system pause. There's no space in that string of information. Syntax is very strict. Sometimes you hear strict typing. Well, yes, we have to be very careful because all special characters have special meaning in C++. That's the syntax. And C++ is case sensitive, so upper lower case is unique. So Kate with an uppercase K is different than Kate with a lowercase k. So you'll need to watch carefully and type carefully. Upper lower case is significant. $11. After we've typed in our source code, that's what we're typing, the rules and the syntax of our code and our logic, we want to run the program. So choose the green arrow local Windows debugger button, or simply type Control F5. Hold down the Control key and tap the F5 key. That's a simultaneous power keystroke, which will begin to execute your code. So if we look up here, right here is your local Windows debugger. Just click your green arrow to execute, or hold down the Control key and tap the F5 key. Your output will show on the command window. Remember, that's our black screen background. Close the command when you are done or satisfied with your output. You've reviewed it and it seems accurate. If there's an error, continue to edit the code. Whenever you edit the code, you must again file, save all, and rerun to make sure that the necessary corrections, whether they be logical corrections, syntax, or perhaps a calculation error. 12. Do this every time to protect your Microsoft single sign-on account. So you're going to be signing on with your Star ID account. So always save your work and logically exit the Visual Studio application by doing the following. File, save all. That saves all project information, the project itself, the location, the support files, your header files, your source code files, and then file, close solution. That closes the project as a complete solution. So logically now we're closing the project, and then file exit logically exits Visual Studio. You must do this to protect your account. If you're working on accounts here at the college using our equipment, you would be leaving your Star ID account open and available for anyone to pop in and, for example, print on your print account and be charged. If you're working at home, you want to close everything logically and exit logically, because you might have other people that use your device. And anytime I'm done with an activity, I close and exit the software. And if you're done working for the day or for a time, close and exit and log off your device. Now there's going to be a time where we're going to open an existing project. So after we've been able to create a couple of projects in Visual C++, we might want to open that again and show someone our first program, show perhaps a team member, discuss with our peer group, your supervisor, how could I maybe do this section a little better. So reasons to open an existing project, and just be sure you're noting the file extension. What is it we're looking to open? Well, you're going to start Visual C++, choose File, Open a Project, and then use the entire path to browse to, for example, this is my test of figure 2.vcxprog, which you double click on to open the project. So we're going to be looking in the project to open a project, but entering your entire path, which should take you to C:// first name And then maybe you've created a chapter 2, a chapter 3, a chapter 4 folder. You get to the correct folder and then continue to open helper folders until you reach the file itself .vcx project, which you can open in Visual Studio as a C++ project ready to continue to edit or execute. So again, this document is very important. Directions to install Visual C++. Some information moves ahead. There's nothing for you to do necessarily within Visual Studio regarding coding. Some setup things are discussed. And keep this document handy, because when we do begin to work with our first few programs, you will want to reference back to how do I customize those startup features within my customized Visual C++ Studio for development purposes. All right, thank you very much.